Hey guys, welcome to the Dear Potential Podcast, a platform for honest and insightful conversations about life, love, and singleness. Here, we're looking to equip you with practical advice on how to live purposeful and build a purposeful marriage. I am your host, Deborah Briggs, right? A minister, an author, and an entrepreneur. One of my passions is to help you get the best of your singleness by replacing lies with gospel truths and in turn helping you build a purposeful marriage. Hey Aziz, good evening. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, good evening. It's good to be here.
Yeah, it's so good to have you. Woo. This is our second
Thank you.
episode so far, and just to be sure, can you hear me clearly?
I can hear you very clearly.
All right. So but the topic we're going to be discussing about is effective communication, how to build effective communication in relationships. I know a number of you guys that are tuned in are most likely single. There's a 90% chance that you are a single person listening to us right now. And so if while you are talking or having this conversation and you have questions, you can always use the plus button to give us a feedback or send your suggestion. Speak with us. We want to hear from you, basically. And yes, we're looking forward to hearing from you. So yes, Aziz, thank you so much for honoring this invitation. It means a lot to us at their potential. Uh, do you mind?
Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, do you mind introducing yourself? Something we should know.
Oh, well, it's one of those questions we dread answering, but it's okay. Yes, I like to say I'm a communication person, a communication
Mm,
strategist. Although, yes, I have a background in agricultural economics, funny, but I've gone on to spend the most part of my life doing communications. I'm studying for a PGD in public relations and advertising. And then I run Right Up NG. It's a digital and traditional content solutions
yeah,
firm.
awesome. Yes, in case you didn't hear that, it runs Right Help NG and they do everything relating to your communications, right? Writing.
Exactly.
What's your tagline?
It's communicating your
That's
relevance.
the word. So any kind of relevance you have that you want to be communicated, and they've gotten a number of testimonies from people that have admissions and what have you in other parts of the country and even on a global scale, right? So yes, you should check it
Yeah,
out.
sure.
I'm honored to have you on here. Okay.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah, so down to the topic. What would you say effective communication is? Because I remember during when we were all in secondary school, I used to think communication was just talking, when we talk about communication, it's about, just talking, you doing the conversation, you running the conversation, giving everybody your advice. But what do you think communication is? Can you shed more light?
Okay, so at the risk of sounding
Yeah.
theoretical, when you talk about communication, basically three things are involved. Uh, there has to be a speaker, there has to be someone listening, and of course, there has to be a medium. So you cannot say you have communicated effectively if you're saying something and then the person you're talking to does not understand you. I can remember when I think it was about 14, 13 years ago, I was preparing for this examination and I think it was my GCE I was preparing for back then, and I was reading this book by Dr. Dele Ashade, and then it was trying to explain what letter writing
Mm,
is in the book, and he said he could remember when it was in boarding school, everybody would receive letters from probably their friends, their girlfriends, their parents. And there was this particular guy who never received any letter from anyone. So
Wow.
one day he decided to write a letter to himself. And when the delivery man came to deliver it, the whole school was like, "Wow, you got a letter today!" And uh, they were all happy and they were like, "Oh, he got a letter too." But in the end, his cover got blown, and everybody was like, "Come on, how do you do this?" So the bottom line of that story is
Hmm.
that it's not communication when uh, there is no feedback. Sort of, there has to be a second
Exactly.
person, there has to be a medium. Yes. So for me, communication is you saying something, someone understanding what you're saying, and of course, there has to be a medium.
Amazing. You talked about something, talk about feedback. I think a lot of us do not um understand that feedback is so important because I'm huge on feedback. And before, I used to think I was asking for too much when I asked people to tell me what you think about this. What do you think? What's your opinion? But I know there is a way to draw the line. But how do you, as a young professional, probably in your workplace, how do you create the balance or strike the balance between asking for feedback constructively and depending on people for your opinions or for validation? I think I should use that instead. So how do you draw the balance? How do you strike the balance?
Well, so I think it starts with understanding who you are first. I mean, you need to get rid of imposter syndrome. First of all, you need to understand your own personal identity. Know that you are enough. When you're in a place, you're not just there because you have to make up the numbers. If that is settled in your mind, then I think the issue of validation to a large extent would be reduced. So in getting feedback from people, I think you just have to be open with your communication with them from
Mhm.
the get-go. You should have that at the back of your mind that okay, I want to communicate with this person as openly as possible. Because if there is no open communication and uh, the other person, the other party feels that you are holding something back, and of course, there are verbal and non-verbal
Mhm.
communication. Uh, yes. So you might not be saying something, and the other party feels that you're holding something back or you're acting a certain way in which he or she is reading meanings to. Then, if you want feedback from such a person, then it would be skewed. So, in trying to get feedback from someone, you need to also watch your non-verbal communication, and then just watch your non-verbal communication as well. Is it not contrasting with what he's saying? So these are some of the things that would affect the kind of feedback people
So
give you. There are certain people who, yeah, please, you want to say
yeah, I
something?
mean the what you said about verbal and non-verbal communication. Some of the times we are saying things, but we're not acting them out. So, take for example, maybe through our expressions. So, maybe you are telling someone you are angry at them or you are happy or something, and your expression says otherwise. It can pass the wrong message. So, just
Yeah, the consistency is not
yeah.
there.
So, the our verbal has to match our non-verbal communications for our message to be clear.
Right.
Because many and it all goes back to knowing your identity and who you are and what you stand for. Because some of the times many of us face identity crisis. I know we are all learning, and many of us grew up in spaces where these things were not practiced. We're not used to expressing um our thoughts clearly. So there are different stages and there are two major categories of people, or should I say three. The first I've realized is those that actually are self-aware but cannot communicate that. Then there are those that are not even self-aware, so they just go by their emotions. They don't know how to manage their emotions. And there is the other aspect which everybody should work on attaining and learning to be is those that are actually self-aware and can communicate that. So if you're angry, you're not expecting me to guess you are angry. you know, you're not going to give me the silent treatment and say, no, I think I just to
True.
guess that I'm angry. Why didn't you read my mind? That is not communication. And a lot of us do that. A lot of us do that.
That's
And
correct.
one of the things that have helped me
I think.
in my journey too is learning to be self-aware. I wrote a post today and I talked about the importance of doing an audit on our personal lives. So a lot of us go through the day or through our activities. Let's just be carried away by everything, forgetting that we can take charge of our day, right? We can decide, oh, I'm not going to do this particular thing. I would do this particular way. And it all boils down to being self-aware. So when you catch yourself doing what is wrong, instead of giving excuses, just say, am I doing the right thing? Is this what I should be doing? Did I say what I actually meant? Or did I just act out of my emotions? It actually goes a long way in helping communication. I've realized.
The how do you balance up with that? So I actually think that if you feel you're someone like that, what you should be looking at is uh, putting yourself in the shoe of the person who is listening to you. The truth of the matter is, uh, oftentimes we do not know what's going on with the other person. That it's not because sometimes we just have to make excuses for people. Part time, there's a lot of things going
Mm.
on with us. You never can tell what's happening on the mind of that other person. I think it was yesterday a colleague reached out to me and she was explaining something that happened between her and a
Oh,
boyfriend,
shit.
and she had been bereaved. She had been bereaved.
Relationship counselor.
Excuse me.
I'm just.
So she was explaining to me that she had been bereaved past in the past
Mm.
week, and she was going to share that with her boyfriend, right? And when she called him, he was asleep, so he didn't respond well. So she flared up kind of, and the guy also had to react back. And there it was. That was how everything went
Violent.
throughout, and it yes, violence everywhere. So it was a simple case
Mm.
of him not understanding what had happened to the lady. She hadn't communicated that to him, by the way. And there was also a simple case of she not understanding the pressure the guy was going through at work that made him to start sleeping at that time of
Mhm.
the day. So there was a
On both
communication lag there.
ends.
Both of them do not know. I don't know if you get
Yeah.
what I'm trying to say. So I said this to say that almost every time we have a zillion things
Mm.
happening with us, right? So why do you want to show radical candor in your communication? You want to say what you have to say. Understand that the person you're speaking to probably has a zillion things on their mind. If we can take that extra effort to think of walking a mile in the shoe of who we are speaking with, maybe we might be able to achieve some form of empathy.
Mm. That makes so much sense. That makes so much sense. And no matter how simple this might sound, it goes a long way in solving conflicts. Because you just wonder how two people. I sit down and I analyze these things. Because there are things that I've gone through in the past, which of course, I've learned to manage. I'll just think and watch some conversations. Like, well, these two people are saying the same thing. No? Like, so what's the problem?
Right.
Can you they're saying the same thing? Or be patient in that. I think to a large extent, sometimes we forget that we are first believers, right? And there's a part of the
True.
scripture that tells us to that our words should be seasoned with grace. So it shouldn't just be.
Yes,
Mhm.
that's correct.
And I notice this a lot to a large extent. We have these issues with those that are closest to us because they are the ones that we relate to on a daily basis. You know, we and there's a tendency to
Yes.
get to that see finish level. Oh, I know this person's weakness. Oh, I know what this person feels at in,
They
yeah,
call it
in that
finish.
sense. And you forget that you still need to reach out to them with grace. Everybody still needs space, even you yourself. And so when we remember that, what inspires our conversations as well is the fact that Christ loves us, right? And it still extends us with grace in spite of our failures and whatever we go through. And it's always so profound for me. So one of the things that I've heard, Mhm.
That's
that you have something to say?
no, no.
Yeah, one
Please
of
go
the things
ahead.
that have helped is also reflecting much more on God's love, because we don't know how much it can do if we take more time. Many of times we have a problem focus, a focus problem. So we are looking so much on what to do rather than who we are to be, because it's in being that we can do, right? So we ask ourselves, we should ask ourselves these questions often: who am I, and what does Christ, or how does Christ want me to relate with my fellow believers? Which brings me to the next conversation. The issue of family, parents,
Okay.
siblings, and relatives. So in the typical African setting, of course, we have different cultures and tribes, but there is this, to a large extent, many families do not encourage effective communication, most likely because many of them did not
True.
experience it growing up. And so, one of the things that would hinder people from communicating, which I've realized, is past traumas. So, trauma doesn't have to be something severe. It might just be you having, maybe you're maltreated when you were growing up, or you were always talked down on, and your voices were not always heard in the spaces that you grew up in, family, right? So what do you think? How bad do you think traumas affect our communications in the family?
Thank you very much for the question. So I think traumas have a long way to go in the way the communication skills of a child eventually becomes formed. Uh, Using myself as a personal example, I grew up in a large family, right? And beyond
You,
the family
it's
being large.
breaking in between.
Okay, can you hear me clearly now?
Yeah, it's clear, but there's a break in between. We can go on.
Okay, clearly now. All right. So I was talking about myself growing up. I grew up in a very large family, and beyond it being a large family, I grew up in a
Sorry,
religious home,
when you mean
and
large family,
because of that,
how large?
okay, how large? We were seven. I mean, I have six other siblings, and then my two parents, my my mom and my dad. So we were
Mm.
nine in our nuclear family. So that said, it was also a religious family in school. So by religious, I mean there are certain things you could not say. There are certain forbidden things. There are certain stories you could not say. There are certain clothes you could not wear, and all of those. Why that's not the focus of this question, right? But what I was saying, I found out that uh, I actually began to, back home, I would be seen as a quiet guy. I couldn't say everything I wanted
Azeez.
to say. As a child, I was a sensitive. I had a lot of questions I want to ask because I used to read a
Mm.
lot as a child. So I'll probably pick up this book and then see this and I have questions, but I can't ask because I know if I
It's a no-go area.
do. So it's a no-go area. So I have to just keep some of those things to myself. And then you find out that when you get to school, you start seeing other children and then you start asking these questions. I mean, it actually takes the grace of God not to fall into the wrong hands, right? So if you're asking other children who already have distorted
Mm.
information about these things, then you're also getting skewed
Mm.
information. And then you find out that what happens with some other children is they say they, they are hypocrites in
Mm-hmm.
school. So they say, at home is very sensible in school. So he's having a say dual character now. So you are seeing him as a gentle guy at home, and then in school you are seeing him as another shade entirely. And for some, it's not like that. They continue being docile till they are old, and you find that they're unable to communicate themselves themselves properly wherever they find themselves. So I think the kind of training children receive at home, traumas, uh, how the parents encourage them to talk, goes along with the form, the communication patterns of any child going forward. And funny thing is, there's this saying like father like son, like mother like daughter. I don't know how it sounds, but to a large extent, it somehow turns out to be true because people eventually pick up the habits and patterns of wherever
Okay,
they're from.
sorry.
They tend to grow
Can
up.
you speak up a
Okay,
bit?
okay. Can you hear me clearly
Yes,
now?
please. A lot better now.
Okay, so I was talking about the saying like father like son, like mother like daughter. So a lot of arguments have come up with that particular phrase. But then, to a large extent, you find that people, I mean, children pick up the habits of
Yeah.
their
Mm.
parents, their environment. So when such a child who has come out of a traumatic setting in court gets married or relates with other people, you find that they begin to exhibit those traits that have been part of their life since they were young. So I think it's very important that parents, guardians, siblings pay attention to how we relate to one another in their own setting.
Hmm. Just siblings pay attention to.
How we relate to one another in their own setting.
Yes, it actually affects a lot. I mean, we fail to see that these issues are interconnected. And when I realized that, I said I was going to do my best to not to see that it doesn't repeat itself. Because sometimes it's so easy to be on one side of the extreme, right? And that's why wisdom is available to us to know how to apply whatever knowledge we have. Because to a large extent, it's not just knowing or it's not just having the knowledge that would help you get better at effective communication. It is knowing how to apply what you have learned. And so one of the things you can actually do is being conscious. It can never be overemphasized. You know, it's one thing to say, okay, I'm going to get better at communicating. It's another thing to say, oh, so to my sister, I would ensure I practice empathy, or I would ensure I am patient with her. I will listen to her opinions. I won't just listen for listening's sake. So putting those knowledge to practice by relating it to your relationship, because whether you like it or not, these are real life issues. Right? So
Good.
these are real life issues,
Yes, I'm listening.
and one way to build your communication skill is by actually practicing. There is no better way. There's no better way. So one other thing when it comes to family is dealing with your past trauma, and you can't actually deal with them without just acknowledging that they exist.
Dear Potential was founded in 2018, and since we've been set on a mission to help enough singles get adequate knowledge on how they can live purposeful and in turn have purposeful marriages. We are set to equip them with tools and initiatives on how to achieve this. We have several programs ranging from the singles hangout to guys conference and other initiatives we hold on a regular basis.
Hi guys, welcome back to
Thank you very much.
and to those listening, welcome back from the break. Let's just say we went on the commercial break. Yeah, so good to be back. And yeah, so we're talking about effective communication in families and how past traumas play a large role in the way you communicate. So yes, I was asking Aziz, how bad does trauma affect communication?
Okay, thank you very much. Uh, I actually think traumas have a big role to play in how the communication skills and communication patterns of children is formed over time. So you do not want to compare a child who has been muffled at home as who has been muffled at home with another child who has been allowed to express him or
Mm,
herself rather. I was given the example of myself while I was young. I grew up in a large family. I mean, I had six other siblings, my mom and my dad, and the environment was sort of religious. By religious, I mean there were rules. So you don't say this, you don't say that, you don't wear this, you don't do that. So because of that, as a child, I was a reader. I would read everything available. There were books for me to read. But when I read and then I have questions, but I'm scared. I was scared. I couldn't ask questions because I didn't know what question was out of bound. I didn't know what question was okay for my age. And it was just all God's mercy and grace that I didn't learn the wrong things when I got into school and then I started talking to other people. So imagine children who are not that lucky. You find yourself in that environment where you find yourself in that environment where your expressions are kind of muffled, and then you get to school and then you're speaking with children who have distorted information. What eventually happens is that both the first child and the second child end up worse for it. So traumas at home really play a very vital role. I mean, do I say vital now? I mean, they have very bad effects on. So it is important for parents to pay attention to how they allow their children to express. It's important for them to allow them ask their questions. It's important for them to allow their children to be vulnerable with them, and they themselves should be vulnerable with the children. That's very important because
mm-hmm.
it goes a long way.
Two-way streets, right?
Yes, it's two way. I mean, if you're asking the child to be vulnerable to you, then to some extent you have to be vulnerable to that child as well. Let them know that you're not superhumans, so to speak. You have flaws yourself, and
Mm,
when children see that you're open to them, you let them know that you, as their parents, as their siblings, as their guardians, you have flaws. Then they will be willing to open up to you, and it's going to be better for them by the time they start building bigger relationships outside.
mm. So good. That is so true. Thank you so much for that. I mean, it's it might seem so simple or so little, but the extent to which this affects relationship is appalling. One of the things I have noticed, um, and I've actually let me put that as I've noticed is communication. People think they're communicating, but they're not. Many people think they are growing, and one of the things that stifle growth is when you do that when there's lack of communication, because where communication exists, people thrive. Actually, people are able to know what areas they need to improve. People are able to accept feedback and work on areas they need to improve. And so, in a situation where everybody is just acting as if everything is fine, but you know things are not fine, so you just keep quiet and saying, "Let God's will be done." Or you, you know, those still today, people that understood the gospel now. I still have issues with when people say let God's will be done. So because I have to ask them, are you actually saying this because you are trying to be responsible, or you are saying you are really as you really understand God's will and you want it to be done? So yeah, these are some of the things we need to ask ourselves, because sometimes we blame God, or we put responsibility on God where He has put responsibility on us. So it's so important that um we learn these disparities. It will go a long way. Thank you so much. One last thing we will talk about before we round off this episode is
Okay.
romantic relationships. I don't know if you have experience, but one of the things we've always taught in Their Potential is the fact that
That's true.
Christ defines us, right? And in spite, most of the things we know and we practice in our romantic relationship are not any much different from what you should know as a single person, because in the end it is still the fruit of the spirit, right, that we need. It is how well you are growing in kindness, how well you're growing in patience, how well you're growing in what are the other fruits? Please help me.
Yes.
Goodness, temperance. uh So, what would you think has been your greatest lesson when it comes to communication in romantic
Okay,
relationships?
for me, the greatest lesson when it comes to communication in a romantic relationship is that when you're open with your communication, I think it goes on to deepen the love between the two people. So when I know that when I speak to my partner and then she listens to me, she wouldn't judge me. She takes her time to listen to me. Then I think I trust more. And then in the end, what you have in that relationship is peace. I was telling someone recently that sometimes I think where the challenge comes from in most romantic relationship is everybody wants to talk. How about you take time to listen to each other?
Mm.
How about you just say, okay, I just want to listen to you? In the place of listening comes understanding. That's what I think. So when you take time to listen to your partner, I think you would hear what is not even being said. When you take time to watch what your partner is doing, you understand what the person is not even saying. Now, there's a difference between what is not being said and silent treatment. I think silent. Okay.
Yes, please.
So, open communication in a relationship brings understanding. When you're able to make time out to listen, especially, I think where the problem comes from in most relationships is everybody wants to talk. So you take out time to listen to your partner and say, yes, I want to listen to what you have to say. Then you will understand what is not being said. So I think I have to say that there's a difference between understanding what is not being said and when a partner is deliberately giving out the silent treatment. So those are two different things entirely. So observation is different from silent treatment. But most importantly, I think we as young people in romantic relationships should take time out to listen to our partners. I think with that we'll have understanding, with that we have more peace, and we have a relationship that Christ will be proud of.
Mm. Amazing. Yeah, I think one of the other things we should talk about, still on this subject, is the difference between male
Okay.
and female. What difference do you think it plays? Because I know there's some people that say there's not much difference. There are people that say it's a lot, and there are other people that say, well, let's just communicate anyhow. So, but what I observed, right, is while there are differences in both genders, there are some that are peculiar to people, and of course, based on either what they've learned or their backgrounds. So while okay, let me ask you first before we go on. What are your thoughts?
So I wouldn't want to join the school of thought that believes that there's a major difference in the way male and females communicate. I wouldn't know if there's an empirical study that has been done on that, but what I believe, my school of thought is that it all boils down to our personal understanding of communication. So if I understand communication the same, if my partner understands communication the same way I do, and I understand communication the same way she does, then I think almost always we'll be on the same page. So I really do not think that there's a gender disparity. It just boils down to how well we understand communication, I think.
Mm.
In my opinion, actually.
Yeah, because I've I I read a book.
Okay,
The author was talking about how our brains are wired differently.
that's
And
correct.
of course, scientific research quite valid. I was able to pick some points. While one gender might be more analytical in their approach, notice that doesn't mean that the other gender cannot learn these things. So one person
Exactly.
slower, yeah, one person might be slower in processing things, or might like things to be in a particular order. So one is more ordered than the other, and one is more structured than the other. Or so when I mean order, it could be male and female. So it depends on your gender difference. It plays a pivotal role actually, and also how well you have trained your brain based off the day to day in activities. And so I put the disparities as well, but I don't want to deny the fact that they exist. So I just think because naturally I'm not a structured person. I am
Okay.
just go on with the excitement. However the excitement takes us. You get. But I have learned over time that structure is so important. I've learned that
Absolutely.
yeah, for growth to occur, you need to structure has to play a huge part in development and progress all round. So even in your prayer life, your spiritual life, if you don't, no matter how willing you want to pray and you don't put structures in place, you would not pray, right? Those kind of things. So while I acknowledge this is, it's not just to acknowledge and say, oh, this is what I'm going to stay with. It's actually using it as a way to improve and seeing, oh, what areas am I better at, or what goals do I need to achieve, um, improve in this area to be better at implementing these goals. And I noticed it makes a lot of difference because one thing I've noticed is that an acoustic issues in relationship is one person. It will bring me to the next point. One person is uh I don't know why you're always so struggling about this thing. Can't you just must we always plan everything? You get? Can't you just um, be spontaneous about this thing? Or why are you so scattered? Like why is you don't want to put order to your life? I know and people don't say it like that. Some people say it like that. But I'm just like real life scenarios and these things exist. So instead of just viewing it from that lens, the profound things I've realized, and which is the purpose of marriage, God's way, is the fact that God made us different for a reason. So that one party can understand the other, put themselves in the other person's shoes, and help them improve in those areas they are weak at. And so what many people fail to see is that, oh, I don't care what your level is currently. I just care about you getting my point. Do you get? And
Mm. Yeah.
if we see it as an advantage. Our differences can complement each other. That's one thing I've noticed.
True.
So it goes a long way in helping um our communication. Yeah, this has been really insightful. And I want to say, do you have any parting words? Do you have any final words? Anything you want to add? Anything you missed out?
Um, maybe on the issue of romantic relationship, I also think another important thing is knowing when to compromise. Sometimes uh, conflict will happen in communication. We need to know that that's certain. We should not even look at avoiding conflicts,
Mm.
but we must just continue working hard at having effective communication,
Because they will
and
always
then we need to work hard at having effective communication between ourselves and our partners, and we must know exactly when we should reach a point of compromise to say,
mm,
okay, yes, I want to shift here, let's meet at the middle. I think that's very, very vital
on both ways. True.
on both sides. Yes, I think it's very vital.
Mm. Now that you mentioned that, it is so profound because sometimes we okay that now brings us back to seeing it as not just a meeting. But I don't want us to digress. So yeah, giving room for um each other and understanding that it's a we thing. How can we achieve this? And one of the things that people fail to understand is um in your avoidance of conflict, you actually miss the point of what's that word? Intimacy. Because it's not so much about trying to avoid conflict. It is what you do about those things, about when you fight, when you disagree. It's how to manage them. And this is something we all have to practice individually and collectively to communicate. So thank you so much, Aziz Okeyale, for coming on. We appreciate your presence and it means a lot.
Thank you very much for having me on the podcast today. Thank you.
All right, take care. Bye.
Bye.
That was some insightful session. um, Thank you guys so much for listening. As usual, if you have questions, if you have suggestions, if you want to contribute and join in the conversation, you can always do so using the hashtag DearPotential or DearPotentialORG. I can't wait to hear from you guys. Tell us what you're learning. Tell us how this episode has blessed you, what you have learned, and how you're willing to apply these lessons to your relationship at work, in your family, in your relationship. Because whether you like it or not, your communication goes a long way in determining how you're growing and what you're willing to build as a person. But much more, we must realize that we are first Christ, and everything that we do is understanding that He first loved us. So we love other people because He first loved us. We are patient and we're willing to hear them out because Christ did the same for us. That is what love portrays to us. And so not just that, oh, Christ actually died for me or Christ loves me, but how is love influences your actions? How is love helps you to say, okay, instead of me complaining, I would actually seek to understand this person. Instead of me talking, I want to listen. I care about this person more than the issue that is going on. I care about preserving this person's personality and who they are, rather than just voicing out my opinions, I honor the word of God, because that is our greatest priority, right? Irrespective, and I want to grow. I'm willing to grow. I'm not just saying that's how I am or that's who I want to be, and it goes a long way. I want to hear from you guys. I want to hear how this is helping you and what questions you might have. Do well to reach out to us. I can't wait to hear from you guys. Expect a new episode every second and last Friday of every month. For advert placement or sponsorship in any of our episodes, please write to us via our mail, dearpotentialorg@gmail.com. We're currently working on our online platform. Please expect more info about that soonest. If you love to support this ministry, do reach out to us via email as well. Connect with us via our social media platforms. Share your experiences and accepts with us using the hashtag DearPotential or Dear Potential Podcast.